Good morning, everyone. This is Bro Diallo. Happy Jonathan Jackson Day. That was Dead Press. I'm an African, clean version. But I would encourage you to go and get the original version. At least listen to the original version of I'm an African. That's the first track off their first album, Let's Get Free. It don't really have as much punk without the cuss words, you know. And I used to Ajamu, chairman of the Kansas City chapter of the National Black United Front, when I was a frontline soldier in that organization. He used to get on me about cussing. And he felt that he would tell me, he's an old school organizer. So he knew how to tear you down and compliment you at the same time, because he'd been organizing black folks all his life. You know how he is. So he would say, brother, you're far too intelligent. You're far too articulate to have to use such language, to rest on such vulgarity to get your point across. And I'd always say, brother Jamu, how do I describe profane things without using profanity? How do I describe atrocities without using the most wretched language? How can I drive that home? I don't want to use technical terms. I don't want to have to talk the good talk the right words. Sometimes you have to be able to say what you shouldn't have said or shouldn't be saying, because we living in conditions we got no business living in. So that's something we used to debate about. But at the very least, I would never hear him cuss, especially in public. But I mean, and also Ed O.G. and the Bulldog said, this ain't our language. What's curse words to them? This ain't even our language. Y'all the ones started the curse words. So you can't impose your language on me and then think you're going to dictate to me how to use something you forced me to have. If I didn't know English, I wouldn't know curse words. And I got no business knowing English. You haven't stole my ancestors. If you hadn't colonized the world, then I could, maybe have some other words. A more humane vocabulary, because this is a language of war. The United States, can you imagine? Like the F word. It means the most intimate thing and the most wretched thing at the same world. The world, this language just fuses so much sex and violence and death. It is truly his language. But I digress. Go listen to the original version of I'm an African, and I know what's happening. AFRICA, Puerto Rico, Haiti, and JA, New York and Cali, FLA. Yo, it ain't about where you stay. It's about the motherland. Man, it's a very ambiguous, inspirational, hard-hitting song. Anyway, today is the anniversary of the Marin County Massacre, when Jonathan Jackson kicked in the door waving the 4-4 at the Marin County Courthouse, took several of the clerks and the bailiffs and the judge hostage, and demanded that they release his brother and his two co-defendants who were on trial facing capital murder charges for a crime that the court system knew they hadn't committed. He decided to take matters into his own hands. But he made one fatal error that his brother wrote about his younger brother after he was killed. He said that his brother made one fatal error in his heroic attempt to liberate some unjustly detained political prisoners. He said that his brother underestimated the brutality and viciousness of the system. He felt that he knew that the U.S. judicial system, or at that time what we called the white power structure, I don't know what y'all call it nowadays, the system. But it ain't the system. There are several components of the system that ain't the system, that don't reflect power and oppression. But, as we age, we want to be more vague. Because back then, y'all don't want to offend your white friends. But the white power structure. He felt that, Jonathan Jackson knew that the white power structure didn't give a hot, dirty damn about the well-being of African people, the preservation of African lives in the 60s or today. But he felt that if he could get people who were white folks, who were members of the white power structure, In fact, if he could secure a white man who was at the pinnacle of white power structure, a judge in a courtroom, he felt that if he could get his clutches on one of them and hold them hostage, then he could exchange the life of a man who was highly valued in the system for the life of 3 men who were of no value to the system. Which is, on the surface, a rational gamble. Because all his life, Jonathan Jackson had seen that, the life of 1 million black folks under the white power structure is not worth the life of one. Or as, let me say, as the Zionist, genocidal Zionist has once said, the life of a Palestinian or all Palestinians isn't worth one Jewish fingernail. So that's, lifeonomics, valuing people's lives under occupation, under oppression, under genocide. It's ironic that, the Zionists go from Nazi persecution from suffering Nazi oppression to imposing Nazi level oppression. It's the cycle of oppression and imperialism. But anyway, Jonathan Jackson said, if I could get this one judge, if I can get a bailiff, the white bailiff, if I can get these county clerks and secretaries, if I can get these people and put them under the gun like they got my brother under the gun. They charged my brother with a minor crime and gave him 1 year to life. They kidnapped my brother off of the streets and threw him away like garbage. And even after my brother was, quote unquote, rehabilitated, he became a scholar, a philosopher, a published author, a respected figure, a man who embodied the very principles of America, liberty and justice for all, a man who more embodied the principles of America, a nation founded on rebellion against the oppressive King George and all the rhetoric and lies that America tells about itself, a man who reflected those principles. So Jonathan Jackson thought, wow, they're going to kidnap my brother, and not only did they steal him away, but now they're going to attempt to murder my brother. So he thought to himself, they took my brother by force under the barrel of a gun. They kidnapped my brother. They are now threatening my brother's life. So justice, if the state is acting like a criminal, then I don't have to respect the laws and the standards and the codes of the criminal court. So Jonathan Jackson, on this day, August 7th, went into the Marin County Court with a couple of machine guns, a pistol, and a couple of revolvers, and kicked in the door and said, I'm taking over. Just like George Washington did when he stepped to the redcoats, when he stepped to the imperial governors of the British crowns and said, no more monarchy for us. He said, I'm taking over. He took these people's hostage and said, I don't wish to harm these people. I didn't want to have to kick in this door waving my guns. But you've left me no other choice. There have been petitions, there have been briefs, there have been appeals, there have been protests, there have been all these actions to liberate George Jackson and the Soledad brothers, to bring justice to all African people. We have tried all peaceful means as you prescribed and laid out before us. We did everything y'all told us to do, and then we did it a second time and a third time. And yet, we received no justice. So it's time to go to the gun. And George Jackson gave his brother his full blessing. If you read Soledad Brother, the prison letters of George Jackson, you'll find how, in this modern time, we say how Jonathan Jackson was radicalized. And I'm not offended by that term, radicalization. Because radicalization simply means to awaken someone to the fundamental truth, to expose someone to fundamental realities. And then instead of acting and living based on illusions, you act and live based on fundamental understandings. You react and interact with things based on a fully assessed understanding of who you are, what that is and where your station is in life. That's all radicalization is. And people try to pretend like, well, radicalization leads to violence. No, it doesn't. Violence is here, perpetual, saturated throughout the system. What radicalization can do is lead to violence against those in authority. The non-radicalized people commit violent acts all the time. But what they do is they commit lateral or descending violence, meaning that they commit violence against people who are equal to them in the status quo, within their class, within the hierarchy, or people who are beneath them in the hierarchy. But people who have not been radicalized never commit what they call ascending violence, meaning that they attack the people who are above them in the social, economic, political hierarchy. So that's what radicalization means. Say, well, I'm not going to step to my brother in the street and rob him. I'm not going to go home and beat my woman and beat my kids. I'm not going to go to work and cut off other people's electricity who can't afford to pay their electricity. I'm not going to go to work and repossess a poor woman's car when she needs to get groceries and take her children to school. I'm not going to commit violence against people that are equal to or beneath me on the socio-economic system because they are not responsible. They are victims as much as me. I'm going to attack people above me. I'm going to attack people in power. I'm going to attack the people who create these conditions that we have to prey upon each other. That's all. And that's why when someone says someone is radicalized and commit violence, every single day, every moment of every freaking day, there is descending violence. People in positions of power and authority committing violence against people lower on the social hierarchy. Every day it is normalized. People can walk down the street and see people being arrested, laid out on the pavement. People can see eviction notices posted on people's door. People see homeless people in the street while there are empty residents owned by some capitalist pig, and he's got it boarded up. We see people who are starving to death. Hundreds of millions of children around the world have malnutrition. While another man has so much money, he's literally shooting it into space. That's all violence that we live with and we don't think a damn thing about. We don't even define that violence as violence. But soon as a brother throws a brick at a police car, that is national news. They make documentaries about it. They do national manhunts. People start saying, oh, what is society coming to? So Jonathan Jackson was radicalized by his brother's prison letters. He was awakened to the reality of the world. And he imposed on the system, gave the system a minute taste of his own medicine. But because he was young and brash, he really thought that the system, some elements of the system were honest and true. So if you read the prison letters also, because you can read about when George Jackson started writing his baby brother. And then his baby brother started, and you know, that's what brought Angela Davis to the fold. To this day, I believe that Angela Davis, if it smells like a honeypot, if it talks like a honeypot, if it walks like a honeypot, but I'll get into that some other time. Contact the Conscious Roster, Kidio will be a wado, if you want the inside out on who Angela Davis, some of the issues, even Dr. Clark. I can't trust him. I digress. We're talking about Jonathan Jackson this morning. Jonathan Jackson kicked in there, took the judge hostage with some other court staff, and demanded the release of his brothers. And he said, you release my brother, I release your people. You took my people through violence. You hold my people unjustly. I take your people through violence, and I hold your people through a just cause. Give me my brother, and I'll give you back your judge. And as he was executing the plan, he gave weapons to some other prisoners and say, hey, if you want to ride with me, fight for your freedom, here's the guns. You can join me. And only, 2-3 other men black men in shackles decided to join with Jonathan Jackson. They made it out to a van he had waiting. And the police forces lit that van up. They lit it up, killed the judge, killed the bailiff, killed the secretary. They killed everybody. So he made a miscalculation. He thought this system valued the lives of at least some people. What he didn't understand is that the white power structure does not even value white lives. A lot of white people don't think that either. Go back and listen to my show, White Privilege, The Myth of White Privilege. White folks think this system give a damn about them. So even though he was exposed to some of the lies of the system, there were other lies in the system that he didn't understand. That into the system matters more than the people. It's really a pathological thing. The status quo matters more than anything, and anybody can get it. He didn't understand that there are literally millions of white people who have died to preserve this system, and millions more will die. In fact, this system will kill all living things, including its leaders. You think Donald Trump gives a damn about his children, his wife? Donald Trump lacks the capacity to care for anyone. That is the Urugu mentality. Everybody is an instrument. Everything is a commodity, a resource to be hyper-exploited and cast aside. And I think if Jonathan Jackson had this understanding, he would have maybe had a different approach. But taking some random white man hostage, the system says, hell, we got plenty more white men where that came from. So light it up. But I respect his effort. John, his brother, said about him that even though he didn't live a long life, he actually lived. He died at 17. But he said he actually lived. He was alive for that time. Because, you know, he was freer and more alive than most African people who lived to be 100. Because he rose up, he fought, he resisted. And he lives within our hearts and the memories of we who study revolution, of we who rise up. And he did have a son, even though he was so young. He had a son that he didn't get to see his son grow up. But bless his heart, man. That's Brother Jonathan Jackson. Young warrior, young lion, young Pan-African gorilla. Anyway, let's move on. But like I said, I do think that there was more to this story in COINTELPRO and the honeypot than we many of us will ever know. But I digress. Moving on. Shout out to Jonathan Jackson. Happy Black August, everyone. Of course, we're going to be dealing with Black August themed content for the entire month on the Bro Diallo show, because Black August is one of the times of recognition, one of the holy days that has yet to be co-opted by the system. Black August is a convergence of black radical tradition. There are many black radical individuals, black revolutionary incidents that have happened that converge in August. Now, every year, every day of every year, there have been resistance. Since the first African fell under oppression, there has been ongoing resistance. But here of the African diaspora, in particular, we have chosen August to really highlight the black radical tradition. Not black integrationist, not black suffering, not black excellence, black accomplishments, black elevation within the status quo, but black resistance, armed black resistance, militant black resistance, uncompromised black resistance to the systems and institutions of global white domination and capitalism. So we don't do Dr. King this month. We don't do Message Essay or Reverend Spy and Snitch on Your Al Sharpton. We don't even do Booker T. Washington this month. Now, I'm saying that these people, you know, we don't do Abernathy this month, not this month. I'm sorry. We don't do Integrate. We don't do Michael Jordan and all the black heroes and sheroes, Colin Powell and Obama. We don't do them black heroes, not this month. Y'all take them, y'all drag their asses to February. If you're not black, radical, revolutionary, Pan-Africanist, you don't get acknowledged. Black August. And Kwanzaa and Black History Month and even Juneteenth now all been embraced by the, let's say, the white power structure. I normally say the systems and institutions of global white domination. But let's take it on back to the 60s, to the radical era. Many of our days of recognitions, many of our heroes, they even put a brother Malcolm on a postage stamp. Disgusting. They want to put Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill. And that's one thing. The one thing I'm grateful for the Trump administration. Sometimes racism works on our behalf. And I know, don't gasp, don't clutch your pearls. It's true. Now, we don't have to deal with the sacred visage of Harriet Tubman being on the wretched currency of this nation that still holds African people under bondage and forced labor, uncompensated or undercompensated forced labor. That is slavery. The United States is still a slave state, so you can't see Harriet Tubman's face under U.S. legal currency, under the Fed note, fiat currency. In God we trust on that currency. No way, Jose. I don't want no parts of that. But so, due to the racism of the Trump administration, is canceling out the tokenism of the Obama administration. But I don't think we're out of the woods yet. I think they still gonna do it, but at least I got a little bit more time before I have to see that despicable thing happen. So racism, and I'm like, well, and there was one time Walmart was selling black dolls, the identical black dolls, at a cheaper price than the white dolls. And y'all was going out to Walmart taking pictures and posting them on social media of the little black doll that's like $12.99 and a little white doll that's $19.99, and aside from skin color, the dolls were identical. Same packaging, same thing, everything. And y'all got mad. Y'all, instead of buying up the damn dolls at a cheaper damn price, y'all wanted Walmart to increase the price of the black girl doll. Y'all didn't even say lower the price of the white girl doll. Y'all said increase the price of the black girl doll. And so y'all don't even know how to, y'all don't know how to milk this? So anyway, like I said, sometimes their insane pathological insecurity that results in racism sometimes benefits us. And we don't want those benefits. We don't like them. But I enjoy something when racism works on my behalf. I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that. That's me, though. Y'all, like I said, every day I say, y'all better than Bro Diallo. Y'all more righteous. Y'all more pro-black. Y'all are the angels of the world. And I hope your mansion in heaven has central air as I'm burning in hell. Because if that's what being good requires, then y'all better than me. And, live with that. Whatever that does for you, enjoy it. But moving on. Let's keep this moving. ASAP Rocky is out of jail, and Donald Trump advocated, and some people are crediting Donald J. Trump with getting ASAP Rocky out of jail. This is something you can verify. Donald Trump is a collector of Negroes. If you go and look up Donald Trump in the 80s and 90s, he's cheek to cheek, standing hugged up with every Negro you can name. Mike Tyson, every A-list Negro, every celebrity A-list Negro you can think of. LL Cool J, Hustle Simmons even said that Donald Trump is a personal friend. Donald Trump couldn't get enough. Whenever Negroes would pop up, Donald Trump would come collect them. He is a connoisseur of uppity Negroes. Even him and Oprah Winfrey hugged up. Did I say Mike Tyson? Don King, every rapper you can imagine was name dropping Donald Trump. Trump, check out the Kashinami Trump. Trump was always swimming in a sea of Negroes. He loved to hobnob, rub elbows, cheek to cheek with colored men. He even had a few colored mistresses. And now, a lot of those black celebrities, those elite blacks, and not just celebrities, icons of publishing, icons of media, even Negro colored scholars, even our activists, Al Sharpton, used to call Trump and ask to borrow some money to help fund and always begging Donald Trump to donate to the National Action Network. And now some of those people are trying to shy away from their admiration and friendship with Donald Trump. But some of you Negroes, forget about all them. Let's come back down to the working class level. Some of you black folks are stupid. And I hate to break this to you, but before you can heal yourself, you need the diagnosis of your disease. Your disease is utter freaking stupidity. Look, don't shoot the messenger. Shoe fit, wear it. Hit dog hollow. All that. And let me tell you why. I see some black folks talking about Donald Trump. Now, if this applies to you, then you're the one I'm calling stupid today. If I'm not calling you stupid today, keep listening. I'll probably offend you down the line somewhere. But Donald Trump, some people say Donald Trump's not racist. All of a sudden, y'all want to call Donald Trump racist. And look at all these colors. Look at all these pictures of Donald Trump with colored people. Every color. You can't name a colored celebrity. Michael Jackson. Sidney Poitier. You can't name a colored celebrity that don't have a picture, that ain't been to a party at the Trump Tower and ain't kicked it with Donald Trump, ain't name dropped Donald Trump. All those Negroes that popped up on Celebrity Apprentice. And y'all say, Donald Trump is not a racist. And look, here he is again, collecting another Negro to his Negro stash, ASAP Rocky. And Donald Trump was acting like a groupie. Free ASAP, hashtag. Next thing I know, Donald Trump gonna pop up in skinny jeans and a neck tattoo. Because he's about to get all up into that neo-hip-hop culture. I don't know what the term for it is, just skinny jeans, neck tattoo, hip-hop era. I don't know what the official name of it is. Y'all tell me, I'm old, I can't keep up. Y'all gotta slow down for me to catch up. Now, I wouldn't be surprised. He come out on the lawn. And maybe a diamond grill, who knows? But Donald Trump, but let me tell you, but that's all. But here, what the point I'm trying to make for y'all, I'm trying to explain to y'all something about racism and races. If you're black and you're on planet Earth right now, you were born into and you're going to die on a world that is saturated by racism. And it is a damn shame that you know nothing about how racism works. Now, I'm going to say this to you, to the dummies, because if you're not a dummy, if you're not a dumb black person, if you're not a black person walking around saying, oh, all of a sudden Trump is a racist, but look at Trump has black friends. Trump had threw parties for black people. Trump had black mistresses. Every time you turn around, Trump had a Negro in his pocket. Trump gave money to Al Sharpton. And Trump is in the picture with Al Sharpton on one ear begging and Jesse Jackson in his other ear begging for money. How could he be racist? He gave money to colored organizations and he hobnobbed and rubbed elbows and danced and booyaka and was kicking with black folks all his life. Black celebrities. And many of the black celebrities from Hustle Simmons on down now are condemning him even though they were friends with him. So how you call Trump ain't a racist? I mean, Trump got more pictures with famous black folks than Obama got. And so for you are the ones I'm calling a dummies right now today. And let me explain to you. And this is something, if you don't know anything else about racism and about races, yes, Trump is a racist. You can be a racist and have black friends. You can be racist and have a black spouse. You can be racist and have black or biracial offspring. You can be racist and love hip-hop, reggae music. You can be racist and eat chitlins, hog maw, and barbecue rib tips. You can be racist and live in black people. You can be racist and enjoy the company, the culture, and tolerate or even enthusiastically seek out the company of black people. Why? Because, say it with me, or say it after me, because you don't know what I'm about to say. Racism is not about proximity. Racism is about power. If you are a black person who seeks to be an intelligent black person and not a damn dummy, if you are a white person who seeks to be an enlightened racist as opposed to a stupid redneck racist, see, you got high-level racists sophisticated races, and then you got low-level races. There's hierarchy within racism. Racism is about power, not about proximity. Racism, one more time, repetition is the essence of propaganda. One more time. Racism is power, not proximity. Proximity means how close are you? And we very foolishly died. We were lynched. We were shot down. Medgar Evers to Martin Luther King. We were stabbed. We were spat upon. We had body excrement threw on us. And we were attacked during the civil rights movement trying to secure proximity to white people. Because we were dumb enough to think being apartheid, that's the root of the word apartheid, being apart from white people. We thought that being segregated or separated from white people was the center and the core of all our problems. And so did the dumb racists. So did the working class and poor white racists thought the same thing. So stupid people, whether you are racist or not, think that racism is about proximity. Racism is black people being physically away from white people, and thus the inverse of that, blacks and whites together, little black boys and little white boys going hand in hand. We thought that was the cure for racism, since racism is about proximity. And for so many years, they said white people can drink here in this fountain and black people got to drink there. White folks sit in front bus, black folks sit in the black bus. White folks go this way, black folks go that way. Colored interest, white interest. So they gave us the illusion, the people in power gave us the illusion. People like Strom Thurmond, who was a very powerful, one of the most powerful politicians in America. At the same time he was filibustering the Civil Rights Bill, he was impregnating a black woman and had a black biracial child. And he was still racist to the bone, even though he had a fetish or a genuine sexual attraction for black women. So he had the closest proximity you can get with a person, intercourse. At the same time, he was trying to preserve a system of racism. How you do that there? And so we spend all this damn time tripping off of trying to get close to white folks, or all this time defining good white. You see a white man come on TV and he can do all the dances, the modern dances. And he got a fade. And he might have black fashion, black swagger. And we think, uh-oh, white bae, or there's a white woman. She got her braids and her fingernails and she popping and she can talk black and act black. Uh-oh, white bae, and y'all inviting these white folks to the cookout, knowing damn well they gonna poison the goddamn Kool-Aid when they get there. Because we think if a white person is willing to be in proximity to us, to be close to us, to be intimate with us, then they must like us. And none of that got nothing to do with nothing. Trump is a racist, a hardcore, unapologetic, unflinching, prototypical racist. And yet, he loves him some particular types of colored folks. Because Donald Trump understands that ASAP Rocky and many of these other black individuals and these black organizations that he donated money to were not a threat to the status quo. Racists can tolerate the presence of black people if those black people respect the power dynamic. That white people on top, black people on bottom. And there's a whole bunch of other language that you can talk about based on hegemony and hierarchy and systemic and historical, all that. But the bottom line is the power relationship is white folks on top, black folks on the bottom. And even if the black folk is on top, if a black person has $1 billion, has power and status, if a black person is president, if that black person, even though monetarily or even socioeconomically he is above a white person, as long as that black person adheres to the concepts, the ideas, the ideology of Western culture, capitalism, and so even if he subordinate himself to the ideas of whiteness and he elevate the very concepts of whiteness above anything that's African or non-white, he is still below white folks. You feel me? Why is that buzzing in my ear? What else? Therefore, Trump would love ASAP Rocky Because ASAP Rocky is an old school buck dancing, handkerchief head, Uncle Tom boot licking Negro. ASAP Rocky is hostile to black unity. He's hostile to black consciousness. He's hostile to the interests and agendas and the plight and struggle of African people. He said, I'm in Beverly Hills and I don't give a damn about Ferguson. So a racist would love ASAP Rocky. They wish all black folks were like ASAP Rocky. So Trump advocating for ASAP Rocky is not a contradiction. If you understand what racism really is. Racists, racists, what do? They invade countries full of black people. They go set up colonies in countries full of black people. They always up getting close to us and coming towards us to establish a power dynamic. When white folks have unchallenged power and you have no willingness to challenge them and you're willing to live under and submit to them, you will be welcomed into their home. You can cook their food. You can go into white folks' beds. You can even suckle white babies at your teat, black woman. If you submit, they can get really, really close to you. Closer to you than there is no distance. Because racism is about power and not proximity. So y'all need to stop falling for, oh, there's a black president, there's a black CEO, there's a black judge, there's a black policeman, a black law school, black engineer, hell, there's a black astronaut, and there was black ladies buried in the basement writing the calculation to help get the black astronaut in jail. Look at all these black people embedded all over this racist system. And you start to think, well, the system must be less racist now because look at all these black folks in all these key positions within this system. You have to ask yourself, do these black people challenge the power dynamic or do they support the status quo? Black people can't be racist, but we can be white supremacists. We can take the position that all things white are right. And if you're black, get back. So, the next time you see that I've seen more than a few black people want to try to advocate for Trump or argue that how can Trump be racist? Because look at his history with all this proximity, all this closeness, all these cheek-to-cheek pictures he has with all these Negro celebrities. And look at what he did for ASAP the Rocky. He's still a racist. And if you don't believe me, go find a racist and go buck and go shuffle and drop your head and hold your hat, ring your hat in your hand and say, hey, howdy, sir, and you'll have a new best friend. You want a racist friend? Then go ahead and be the bootlick. And in fact, racism is so much about power and has nothing to do with proximity. Even white people who define themselves as non-racist can't tolerate the presence of a fully African man or woman. If you are a black man and woman that ain't got no bend in your backbone, that you stand up for what's right, you represent yourself with dignity and the power, and you walk with your ancestors and you carry on the interest of your people and you rep the interest of your people, not even non-racist white people really can kick it with you. Most of your so-called progressive white friends will get the hell away from you. Your liberal white friends, even your radical white friends will get the hell away from you. Your socialist, communist, revolutionary communist white folks won't want nothing to do with you. You'll even start to see the anti-racist, the anti-fascist white people can't even deal with the fully formed, fully empowered African. Let me tell you something, and it ain't just us. Look how white folks love dogs. Go to the dog park and see how much white folks love dogs. And then at the same time, they go all over the world and drive wolves and dingoes. And wild dogs are driven to extinction. White people, every species of wild dog, from the wolf to the wild dogs of Africa, to the dingoes in the subcontinent. Every species of wild dog is going extinct. As white folks, every day you turn around, they got a brand new deal. They breeding labradoodles and they crossbreeding Great Danes with Chihuahuas. They got all these, and they just love them. They have these dog shows and dog breeds, and if the dog jump when they say jump, sit when they say sit, roll over when they say roll over. If the dog does everything the white folks said, the white folks will create and buy that dog a silk pillow and let it eat caviar and put a diamond collar on that dog's neck and let the dog lick all over its face. Oh, I love this dog. But soon as a wolf, a fox, a coyote come and say, listen, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to be a dog. I'm just going to do my thing over here. I'm going to hunt in my pack and build my den and do my thing over here. I ain't even going to bother you. No, kill it. Brr. Time to go on a fox hunt. The same white people, they love their dogs and then go out on a fox hunt, go out and hunt, and they shooting Arctic wolves from helicopters with high-powered rifles and scopes, and then go home and set their little dog on their lap and really think that it's about power. So yes, don't let these stupid Negroes come to you and be like, oh, they're not racist. I know white people. I have white friends. I have a white spouse. I have a white mistress. I have a white homie. My homie, I do records like Killer Mike doing records with that white dude, Run the Jewels. He's not racist. Being close to white people, being intimate with white people, being friends with white people. And I'm not saying don't get on the phone today and call your white friends and say, hey, F you, and hang up on them. Have your white friends. Have them. You know, have your white spouse go home and eat that raisin casserole and be happy. Get that shoulder rub and, you know, be happy with your wife. I'm not telling black folks to go out and start cursing out. I'm just saying have that core understanding in your man. In your man. I used to know this Muslim dude who was in some Muslim cult, offshoot of the Nation of Islam. And he used to talk about your man. I'm saying it's the mind. Do you think any of what you're saying is deeper because you say man instead of mind? So anyway, you got to have that thought in your man. Just have that understanding. Trump is still a racist. I don't care if he let every Negro out of jail. He's still a racist. He's going to die a racist. Sooner, hopefully, than later. Oh, let me delete that footage. And it just frustrates me that in the year 2019, creeping up more than halfway on to 2020, we still thinking of black folks, when we get close, a white person that's willing to tolerate the presence, or even a white person who seeks out the company of black people can't be a racist because they're willing to be in close proximity to us. That's like saying a sexist can't be married to a woman because he hates women. A misogynist can't be attracted to or want to keep the company of women. Misogynist can be, you know, even a misogynist or a sexist can bring you flowers and chocolates. He can even rub your feet and run you a bubble bath. As long as you're that submissive, docile image of a woman, sick image of a woman and how a woman is supposed to be in his head, he can be lovey-dovey. In fact, you know, you talk to women in battered shelters. I actually had the opportunity. They are always this boom and bust. You know, oh, he was just so sweet. And when he's not beating the crap out of me, he's the nicest guy. He's so sweet and considerate. He went to my mother's house and built her a bookshelf and a birdhouse. And, you know, he bounced my son on his leg and adopted he did all these wonderful things. And the next thing I know, he's choking me to death. So there's always this syrupy sweetness that comes with it. You know, and the white folks, what did they say when they went down south? We take good care of our Negroes. When we're not lynching them, our Negroes are happy. When we're not mutilating them, raping them, beyond that, it's all good. So these abusive power dynamics always happen. Stop thinking that white people willing to be around you mean they're not racist, willing to eat your food, listen to your music, and fully embrace quote-unquote black culture. You are a damn fool. That's another thing about this wokeness, this woke rhetoric. Woke white folks, woke baby. I'm going to talk about woke some other time. Let's get into the topic of the day because I got some other things I want to share. This show was supposed to be on the 4th. I wasn't supposed to do this show today, but yesterday I walked out of the house and I had a complete flat. And I couldn't get here. That's why I wasn't here. I had a flat tire, but it's worse than that because, you know, me being the man, the rusty knuckle, burly man that I am, I go in the trunk, whip out the jack, crank the car up, you know, get them nuts off, them lug nuts, take them suckers off, and I'm ready to roll, son. But then there was a hiccup. As I had to pull the car out into the street a little bit because I was parked on the curb and the flat was on the passenger side, front wheel. So I pull away from the curb and I turned on the blinkers because I didn't want anyone to hit the car, and I wanted people to know that the car. So I took it about 3-4 feet away from the curb and I turned on the blinkers. I put it up, and as I'm changing the tire, I put the tire back on. I air it up, and I do all that, and I turn, and the car's dead. The battery died while I was changing the tires. And so my wife, being the naive, loving soul that she is, she starts asking random people, please, sir, do you have jumper cables? Could you perhaps give us a jump, please, sir? We live on the south side. People ain't got time for that. People out here trying to make a dollar out of 15 cents. I'm like, please leave these people alone. No, I'm going to ask. She still has faith in humanity. Bless her naive heart. Please, sir, please, sir. So she goes up and asks a couple of people, and they growl at her. So eventually, I'm like, listen, I'm gonna go to this store, this mechanic store, O'Reilly Auto Parts. I'm gonna get an engine starter, and we should have one anyway. The weather's ugly in this town. Our car's getting older. You know, I'm not a preacher. I can't afford to lease a new Cadillac every year. So I got my car's old. So I say, I'm going to go get this thing, something we might need anyway. And if you out here on the road, and I'm going to show you how to get a stalled engine or a dead battery up and going again. So I go under the hood. I show her how to hook the thing up. But by that time, I had given up. I called John and said, I ain't coming in. And he was like, yo, you should have told me earlier. I could have put up a rebroadcast. Rebroadcast is a fancy word for rerun. But on the radio, we don't do reruns. We do rebroadcast. Anyway, that's why I wasn't here. That was on the 4th. And the show topic then, as if now, is Edward Wilmot Blyden, the father of Pan-Africanism. Because his birthday was August 3rd. That show would have been August 4th. But now we're all the way on August 7th. And today I wanted to talk about Jonathan Jackson and revolution versus reactionary radicalization and armed and give some thoughts on armed insurgency within industrial society. I had this whole thing I want to talk about, but I couldn't just not talk about Edward Wilmot Blyden. Now I was thinking maybe I could just do a YouTube or something broadcast. And then I'm like, no, because then that wouldn't be fair to my Q4 radio listeners. Because I wanted to share this message in the way I intended to share. I wanted to do it my way, like Frank Sinatra. But anyway, Edward Wilmot Blyden, even though he is literally the true father of Pan-Africanism, he did have some views that you could say to this day are passé. Passé. But I understand. I mean, people always try to hit me over the head with these type of issues. Like, people that I greatly admire. People whose agendas I consider myself the inheritor of. They often have stark views that are in opposition to mine. Because Marcus Garvey was a Christian and a capitalist. And I'm an atheist and a socialist. And people are like, oh, how can you follow Garvey? It's like, I don't follow Garvey. Garvey's dead. What I do is I build on Garvey. I advance beyond Garvey. I inherit what Garvey left for me as an ancestor, and I move forward with it. And I enhance where he was right, and I correct or fill in the deficits. I don't worship Garvey. He was a man. So it was the same thing with Edward Wilmot Blyden. He was the founder of what came to be called, well, he was born in August 3rd, 1832, when we were still in legal chattel slavery in the United States. He was born in the Caribbean. And to some, I guess, affluent parents, what could be called middle class at that time. But at that time, when he was born. Ethiopian or Ethiopia was a blanket term for all blacks. And Africans would refer to Africa as Ethiopia. So he called what we came to be called Pan-Africanism was actually called Ethiopianism. But there was also another term because Edward Wilmot Blyden was a contemporary of Theodore Herzl. Theodore Herzl is the father of Zionism. And Edward Wilmot Blyden was extremely attracted to the rhetoric and ideas of Zionism. And some historians have even incorrectly called him a black Zionist. But again, he never lived to see, he died even before World War I. So he didn't see what happened in World War II and the eventual establishment of the nation of Israel and what Israel became. But he understood the desire for a displaced people, a diaspora of people to seek out their homeland, their historical homeland, and rebuild their homeland. But he was also a Christian, and he also believed the Bible. So he believed all those nonsense about Moses. Moses never existed. There was never a Jewish or Israeli bondage in Israel. There was no Exodus. There was no parting of the Red Sea. There was no hardening of Pharaoh's heart. There was no plagues that befell Israel in that conflict. The Jews never wandered in the desert for 40 years. None of that's real. All of that's made up. All of it. It's all fake. All of it. All of Genesis. It's all BS. From God creating the universe and all that in 7 days, creating Adam and Eve, all of it's fake. None of that is real. It is all folklore. It is all mythology. It is all delusion. It is not real. But Edward believed that. So he actually believed that the Israel and the nation of Palestine and the Ashkenazim were the people of the Bible and the people of the Word and had a covenant with God. And so that did shape some of his ideas. But even with all of that, Edward Wilmot Blyden was one of the most brilliant African men. And Edward Wilmot Blyden has insights that surpass many of our most educated black scholars, black leaders today. And despite the deficits in his analysis and how some of his ideas have not really aged well, such as black Zionism. And let me tell you one other thing. Let's just get this out of the way. He also wrote that he felt that Islam, or the religion of Islam, was more in line with the African character than Christianity. And even though he lived and died as a Christian, he advocated that African people study, if not embrace, Islam. He felt that Islam was more of an African religion than Christianity. I fundamentally and vehemently disagree with that. But that was his conclusions back in the 1800s. With the information that was available to him and the understandings that were available to him, and he went to Sierra Leone and he saw many African Muslims, and interacted with many African Muslims, and he felt that these African Muslims are more in tune. They're more African, have more of the African characteristics and the African disposition than the black Christians that he would meet. So anyway, I guess I just get those out of the way because aside from that, like I said, being born in the 1830s and being active in the 1850s up until his death in the 1912, yes, and dying in 1912. His thinking was much advanced for his time. If Blyden was alive today, he'd be one of the most forward, progressive, radical thinkers that we had. The vast majority of his ideas and analysis have advanced to this time and are still of use. And when I was thinking about Blyden, I had some, let me tell you something. When I was young, to me, I had a different relationship with my books. it was kind of like I'd read the books and then I'd give them away because I felt that knowledge is not something you hold on to. So when I first started reading, I had a lot of books, a lot of rare books. I had access to so many books. And at this time, in the early 90s and late 80s, that was what was called the Black Books era. There were so many independent black publishers. There were so many independent small black bookstores, and there were books everywhere. And I could never imagine a time where you couldn't go to any black community and there'd be at least half a dozen black-owned bookstores that had got some of the knowledge, and all these major black publishers from Johnson Publications all the way down to A&B Publishers in Brooklyn, New York. I never thought it would be a time where I wouldn't have readily access right in my community of progressive black knowledge, because it was everywhere. It was taken for granted. You know, the Du Bois Learning Center. You go to places, there were books and good information everywhere. And that doesn't even count the cassette tapes and the VHS tapes, and there were even vinyl records of Malcolm X speeches. The community, I never knew a community that wasn't saturated with black knowledge. And when I went to Brooklyn and moved to Brooklyn in 1992, one of the first friends I made when I moved to New York City to live there full time was this brother who worked at a bookstore. And he'd come and I'd try to haggle book prices, and he'd set aside books, and we talked books, and we became lifelong friends over books. And Head Start books and Nkuru books. So anyway, when I would buy a book and I'd read a book, the more I liked the book, the more I would try to find someone to give the book to. And my thought was, I'd give knowledge to people and people would give knowledge to me. So people would give me books and I'd give books. And there was like a book currency and passing books around. And then you would say, well, I want to read this book. And the dude would be like, I don't have that book. But if you talk to homie, he got the book. And then, let me get that book. And we have books circulating all around. I'd have literally over 100 books between Missouri and New York. I'd have books in everybody's hands. And I've had other people's books. And books weren't really something you held on to. You didn't really value the book itself more so than the knowledge in the book. And so I've given away more books than I've kept. And now I regret that, because I wasn't a researcher at that time. I was just a reader. I wouldn't really reference the books. I would read the books, I would draw my conclusions, and I'd pass it on, and I'd seek out another book. And there are a lot of books that I gave away. My goodness, I had 2 books by Blyden, and I passed them on. And the books that I kept a lot of times in that era, in the early 90s, the books that I kept were the books that really weren't that good. They really weren't that good. I'm like, well, this book wasn't all that. Like Maulana Karenga's book. I got that one, Introduction. Because I'm like, this book ain't all that. So I just put it on the shelf. But if I had a really good book, I just couldn't wait to give it to somebody. And I'd look through my friends and my associates and find who's worthy to get this book from me. But I ain't doing that no more. I don't lend out books no more. I will help you secure your own copy. I wish I knew back then what I know now. How to be selfish. Anyway, but I digress. This is one book that I value, that I had to buy over because I had given it away. African World Revolution by John Herbert Clark, Africa at the Crossroads. And this book is, embedded within this book is the biography, the thoughts and opinions of Edward Wilmot Blyden. But it's chopped up because he talks about a lot of other. There's another book, but I try not to, I don't want to come in here. And we're on the Q4 studios are on the second steps. Another book that kind of talks. Chinwezu, I really like Chinwezu. I'd like to meet him one day. But Chinwezu, Nigerian scientist who became a social political thinker. Chinwezu, The West and the Rest of Us, White Predators, Black Slavers, and the African Elite. And then this is one of my oldest books. I actually got this from my grade school. Black History. It's the cover's gone. I've reread through this book and it's all faded. But this is a compilation of books that talks about Brother Biden. And so, this book is just so, these are some of the books I just went back to read and to think about Edward Wilmot Blyden and the father of Pan-Africanism. And I also want to share some recordings because this is Black August, y'all. There's so much dense. And not that I really limit myself. I talk about what I want to talk about when I want to talk about, but I'd like to participate and encourage people to keep the spirit and the themes of Black August alive. And I'd like Black August to kind of boost us into the Black radical tradition, reviving and sustaining the Black radical tradition. So, what did Blyden advocate? What did he articulate? Well, one of the main things that he articulated that was so radical for its time, and it may not be so radical now, because now African is an aesthetic. You got these Uncle Tom, handkerchief head, Auntie Toms, black men and women that wear dreads, that wear African garb, African cloth, that I've been to Nigeria, and I've visited Sierra Leone. You got Negroes that are very comfortable with the concept of Africa or being African American. But there was a time where the Negro elite wanted nothing to do with Africa. And you go to the African people of the colonies, they didn't even want to be identified as African. They wanted to be European. In their fashion, in their dress, in their speech, in their insights and outlook. They would talk about, Plato, the discourses of Plato, and the plays of Shakespeare. And so when Biden came out in the 18, I keep almost saying 19, when Biden came out in literally the 1830s, he was born in the 1830s, and in the 1850s and 60s, he was like, listen, we African. That was a monumental concept, and he would argue for us to reclaim our Africanness. And not only did he call for the elevation of Africanness, he said that we need to devalue and deprioritize whiteness. We even had to stop teaching white crap, white philosophy, white ideas, white history. He said we shouldn't even study white folks' history. Blyden said the racist outlook of the modern Western Europe, he felt, should not be allowed to sully the minds of the new African. He said learning about white folks' history, learning white philosophy, learning white concepts, it sullies the mind of Africans. It pollutes your mind. You can show me where it hasn't? Huh? Didn't Miseducation of the Negro say that Harvard has ruined more Negroes than bad whiskey? He therefore urged that the study of the modern Western civilization be excluded from the curriculum of universities. He said that black folks, it should be against the law to teach African youth the study of Western civilization. And some at that era even argued that Western civilization was an oxymoron. They were never civilized. They didn't behave in a civilized manner. And this was at a time where they still held us in bondage. And he lived from the chattel slavery, Reconstruction, to Jim Crow era. He lived through all of that, saw it all, studied it all. Literate black man. He said, it says, contrary to the wise prescription of Biden, the study of Western Europe culture preempts center stage in Africa's universities. So this is basically saying that, initially, Dr. Clark says on page 326, Blyden said, it sullies the mind, it corrupts the mind for black people to study Western ideas in the minds of Africans, modern Western civilization. But on 328, he says, European culture preempts center stage in African universities. So basically saying, we didn't listen to Biden. We didn't listen to Biden. You can't get a degree as an African without studying European Western civilization, European thought, European value systems, European concepts, European economics. No African university will give you a degree unless you are well versed in the white mentality, white history, white languages, white mindset. And Dr. Clark has gone to every university. He visited every country on the African continent, excluding South Africa. He said he would never set foot in South Africa under white rule. So he visited every country on the continent, every university. He sat at the foot, Sheikh Anta Diop, Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré. So he knew that, he knew that it was a failure. That the white mentality has sullied the minds of Africans to this day. And so Edward Wilmot Blyden, and you gotta realize a lot of stuff we take for granted today. Your capacity to walk the street as a human being and go unmolested by any average redneck white racist. There was a lot of fight. Now we're surrendering much of that. We're losing much of the ground that was gained on our behalf because we're woke. We're no longer conscious. We're no longer ideological. We're woke. And I'm about to talk to y'all about this woke business. But reclaiming our Africanness was a core agenda, a core theme. And what was at the root of reclaiming our Africanness is rejecting all things white. How do we go from 1860 saying we got to be apart and separate ourselves from white folks to 100 years later in the 1960s saying that our salvation rests in being equal to white people? That integrating with white people was our salvation, when we knew literally 100 years before that the exact opposite was truly the essence of black liberation. That white people were not only incapable of living in proximity and peace with blacks, but they were unworthy to do so. They hadn't earned the right to live amongst us. They hadn't demonstrated the capacity to be humane, the capacity to be respectful of people's integrity, physical, bodily integrity, or their national sovereignty. They still haven't. But we're still talking integration and equality with our lessons. So in the last 100 years, all these degrees, all this world travel, all this knowledge and wokeness y'all have, we have regressed. African communalism. This man also grew up, and he predates the communist revolution. But he understood that what Marx was arguing, Marx was essentially arguing that you had to modernize, you had to abandon the feudalistic concepts of the past and come into the industrial age of the future. Well, Edward Wilmot Blyden argued that we don't abandon our African traditions, or what Dr. Marimba Arniche, she called it the asili, our root culture, our core mentality, the African personality, our Africanness, the essence of who we are. But we had to modernize it. We had to modernize African traditions and practices. He had done analysis of collective ownership, what was called at that time land tenure, and the concept of African land tenure and passage of wealth, not the accumulation of wealth or concentration of the wealth of the nation, but the proper and just distribution of the nation of wealth. He was an early social. He was a communist before communism. He was a socialist before the ideas and the of communism and communalism had ever come to Europe. When these ideas of communists holding things in common, cooperation, when they were brought to modern Europe, Europe had how many wars, how many people had to die just to understand that economies and resources should be held in common. That you should orient your economy to meet the needs of the people, not to enrich a few. But Edward Wilmot Blyden was advocating that 100 years and almost a century, well, not necessarily, at least 2 decades before it was ever put on the ground and actualized in Europe. And it was never actualized in Europe. The socialist movements and the communist revolution in the East and the socialist reforms of the West, Africans had all of that long before. And it wasn't even something that we didn't have to have a revolution to be communist. We didn't have to have a revolution to be socialist. We actually in Africa had a capitalist revolution because we were inherently and naturally cooperative. We held resources in common. We gave each according to their need and from each according to their ability. We didn't have concepts of private property. We had very low levels of resource accumulation and concentration. And we didn't have this system of mass enslavement and labor extirpation and extraction and hyper exploitation. And even when you saw these strict hierarchies emerge, they were in African regions that were contaminated, or as Edward Wilmot Blyden said, sullied by the Greeks, the Romans, the Muslims, the Islamicists, brought these foreign, these alien concepts. And even when they brought it to us, you look at Islam in Senegal versus Islam in Sierra Leone. I mean, you look at Islam in Sierra Leone and Senegal versus Islam of Saudi Arabia, or Jordan, or even Jordan or Iran. Even when they contaminate us, we try to clean it up for them. But I'd rather just deal with my own culture than cleaning up the contaminants of another people's culture. So, he was an early communist, a proto-communist maybe, or a proto-socialist, the first Pan-Africanist. And I don't like that term. As I was just reviewing some insights about Blyden, they would even call him a black Zionist. And I really don't like those terms because what we learned about Zionists. I think I can understand when Theodore Herzl was running around asking for a home for the persecuted Jewish minority of Western Europe. It seemed like a noble cause. But they had no idea it would turn out into a genocidal nuclear state, an imperialist genocidal war state, violent, racist, discriminatory state that Israel is. So, again, we have the benefit of history. But again, as Dr. Clark said, Blyden wanted to take indigenous African ways of life and updating them in order to complement the African of today. So you have some people who state, all that African stuff, we got to leave that stuff behind. That's old stuff. And then you have other people who want to be buried in tradition, who don't want to dress, talk, or function any way different than our ancestors did centuries ago. And both of those people are wrong. And they think that tradition is sacred or tradition is irrelevant. But tradition is nothing more than a blueprint or a map. It is a tool for the people. We don't serve tradition. Tradition is to serve the people. And again, a lot of these concepts are commonplace in the conscious community, but we don't have any idea where they come from. We like to think, black people always thought this way. Black people always had these understandings. But in reality, they had again, I'm going to start using this word, sullied our self-concept. That we had to literally re-educate ourselves. We were blind, deaf, and dumb. Our oppressors burned our libraries. They burned down our universities. They murdered our griots and our scholars. They outlawed our capacity to read. They outlawed our drum, our language, our dress, even our agricultural products. They forbade us from growing them. So coming out of 1830s, coming out of chattel slavery, coming out of colonialism, we literally had to recapture and re-realize, and Edward Blyden understood that we couldn't shun tradition, but we couldn't hold to that tradition either, because while we were living according to those traditions, we came under chattel slavery. So those traditions unto themselves were not adequate to address the status. And we still have black people running around, okay, wear African garb and learn an African language and you'll be free. And I'm saying, if you say wear African garb, learn an African language, visit your mother continent, it will enrich your life. It will enhance your life. It will bring maybe some depth and meaning and purpose to your life, but it will not freaking free you. If knowing an African language and wearing African clothes would secure freedom, we would have never been slaves, because we did all that when we fell into slavery and colonization. Don't make sense. So Edward Wilmot Blyden understood that tradition was one thing, but one thing about tradition is that it's very conservative. It's static. And Edward Wilmot Blyden understood we needed revolution, a worldwide revolution. He understood 100 years ago that it's not enough for us to get freedom as individuals, freedom as a particular nation, or for us to even liberate the African continent. We had to free the planet, because this was a system that had no boundaries, that had no self-limitation, that Western civilization, as he called it, was cancerous. And there would be no corner of the earth that would be allowed to flourish under this system. Let's hear some more of his direct words. Blyden states, in all English-speaking countries, the mind of the intelligent Negro child revolts against the descriptions of the Negro given in elementary school books, geographies, travels, histories. Having embraced or at least assented to those falsehoods about himself, he concludes that his only hope of rising in the scale of respectable manhood is to strive for what is most unlike himself, most alien to his particular taste. So, Biden states here that Africans, in order to be human, were taught and accepted the fact that they had to be European, had to make themselves white. We had to strive for what is most unlike ourselves, most alien to our particular taste. We got black people encouraged, oh, we need STEM. We need to secure the bag. Again, 100 years ago, he understood that due to what we now call maybe menticide or miseducation, he said that 100 years ago, that we are out here behaving in ways that are contrary to our interests. We're out here celebrating. Jay-Z got $1 billion. Tyler Perry starting his own need. These integrationist achievements. But this is unlike ourselves. This is most alien to our particular taste. We are basically, Fanon said, we're white skin, black mask. We're black African. We don't behave as African. This is what Marx called alienation. Africans have been undergoing alienation long before Marx was born, and identified alienation under capitalism. So to combat this alienation, he felt that because this is who we were, he concluded that you can't reform this. You can't educate, simply teach Africans some African phrases, or try to encourage them to do better. What he was describing here was the Booker T. Washington model. Booker T. Washington said, behave in a way that makes you most acceptable to white society. And that is our solution. So he understood the movement of integration before the integrationist movement, before Africans were even acknowledged to be human, when we were still 3/5 considered human chattel. So understanding this, Blyden stated that the idea of uniting all Africa has its greatest development in early century. In 1900, the Trinidadian lawyer Sylvester Williams, the attention, Pan-African, wait, that's not the part I want to read. It's the part where he talks about revolution. Okay, here we go. That's something else I had marked. This is what I want to read. Okay, this is Blyden in his own words again. The people generally are not yet prepared to understand their own interests in the great work to be done for themselves and their children. We shall be obliged to work for some time to come not only without the popular sympathy we ought to have, but with the utterly inadequate resources. So that little 1900, early 1900, late 1800 vernacular. But let me restate that last sentence. We shall be obliged to work for some time to come not only without the popular sympathy, but we ought to have, but with the utterly inadequate resources. So he said, because the African is educated out of their damn minds, the average black man and black woman is educated or indoctrinated to be insane, to pursue alien interests, to value alien and foreign things that are alien and hostile to us. So the few of us who seek to unite Africa and liberate ourselves and the rest of the world will work without the sympathy of our people and with inadequate resources. That's what he said. In fact, he understood this because he had already lived it. And now today, black people, I ain't got nothing to do with it. Niggas ain't this. Let me tell you something. Our ancestors struggled under worse conditions than us. And they understood, yeah, if you're going to fight for the liberation of any oppressed people, you will have little sympathy and inadequate resources. But you must do it anyway. Wilmot Blyden, and this one more statement, quote from Blyden. The Africans, so propagandized, strive to be those things most unlike himself and most alien to the culture that produced him. He feeds grist into other people's meals and sees nothing of his creative self as a result. I mean, this is why I laugh at prophecy. Because if you look at history, if you look at human societies, if you look at patterns of behavior, if you understand conditions of people, you know well that you can predict the future. Blyden's basic conclusion was falling into colonization and slavery and oppression, and coming up under our oppressor's educational system has reoriented the African to not only fail to act in his own interest, but to even recognize what the interests of African people are. And as a result of this, we have come under the brutal oppression and slavery of a people who, at any time, can end us. Blyden argues that the solution to this is to, number one, shun all things Western. Shun Western civilization. Western civilization, shunning Western civilization is not throwing on a dashiki and going to learn to speak Swahili. Shunning Western civilization is saying capitalism, patriarchy, private ownership of land, all of these weird, inhumane concepts, militarism, imperialism, all of these fundamental isms. And there are many Africans who speak African language and only wear African garbs and were born and raised and will live and die their entire lives on the African continent, and they are fully westernized. So it's not about anything superficial. And that is why he also said we shouldn't fall under what I have come to call the tyranny of tradition. Tradition is to serve us. We have the capacity and the right and the responsibility to extract from African culture what is of use to us and disregard things from our own tradition, our own culture that are obsolete or of no longer use to us. Like believing in mysticism and magic and unreal things. Tribalism and things of that nature. So he said that we have to go in an opposite direction where they want to do private property, we do communalism. They want to do capitalism, we do socialism. They want to do status quo, we do revolution. But also, after shunning them, we have to also accept that the vast majority of our people will not be there for us. They won't even, let alone will they not join us, they will not even be sympathetic or supportive of our plight, and we won't have the resources, but it must be done anyway. It must be done anyway. Because if this work fails to be done, the African will go extinct. And in Blyden's time, he felt that extinction meant that the African tradition, the African mentality, the African nature will disappear. Black people will still be here, but we will fully function as Europeans. We will have European concepts, European ideas, European mentalities, European personalities. To him, that's what extinction meant. Because in the 1800s, nobody conceived of nuclear weapons. There was no understanding of global warming. They didn't really understand the reach and the level of damage that capitalism could carry out. He didn't even know that Zionism would result in more Western hegemony, more Western genocidal imperialism. He didn't even grasp that concept. So what used to be extinction, meaning an absolute loss of our sense of self, an absolute loss of our culture, has turned into a biological extinction, an ecological extinction, the literal loss of the life-sustaining capacity of the world. So it's even worse than Edward predicted. And in these texts, both Chinwezu and Dr. Clark have asserted that we ignored Edward Wilmot Blyden. His most crucial input, his most crucial advice, his most crucial analysis has been cast aside. So I encourage everyone to begin to resurrect his research and his writings and his understandings. Pan-Africanism is inherently revolutionary. Pan-Africanism is not simply cultural. It is not simply black people embracing each other, black people valuing each other, black people communing with each other, black people realizing that we all come from Africa. Pan-Africanism is a direct, uncompromising challenge and is an enemy to global white domination. It seeks to subvert global white domination. It seeks to purge Western civilization. And now many people try to water down Afrocentricity and Pan-Africanism. Even Miletti Asante, the very man who introduced me to the Afrocentricity. And as I mentioned earlier, Maulana Karenga, many people think that we can be Afrocentric within the status quo. That we can walk up in corporate America wearing our dreadlocks. We can join the military, the European military, the US military wearing our natural braids. That we can go graduate from Harvard and wear a red, black, and green sash at our graduation. And that's that is not Afrocentricity. Afrocentricity is dismantling Harvard. Afrocentricity is forcing a retreat of all US and imperial military forces from all of our lands across the globe. Afrocentricity is extracting all of our reparations from corporate America and the Western economy and shutting down all multinational corporations and their rape of our global resources. So Afrocentricity has been perverted. It has been diluted. Pan-Africanism has had its teeth and its claws removed. And Edward Wilmot Blyden, the father of Pan-Africanism, needs to be resurrected. His teaching, his analysis, his reality needs to be brought back to the fore. It needs to be enhanced. And Edward Wilmot Blyden himself would not appreciate if we went and took his teachings word for word and said he said it in his gospel. As he said, we need to modernize tradition. We need to modernize analysis. We need to modernize Pan-Africanism. We need to take what he said in the past and what we know today and merge them into a functional revolutionary Pan-African struggle. This is Bro Diallo Show, Q4 Radio. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, all that stuff. If you can, if you're in a position to, please help to support, to sustain the Bro Diallo Show, Q4 Radio. I still have to supplement the show. I, for more or less, have to pay to be here. I'm losing being here. I'm subsidizing the show. So I'm literally paying to do this work. And I don't think that I should have to. I think that if this show is of value, then the community should sustain the show. As you see, when I talk, when I present, there's no corporate sponsorships. There's no partnership. It's the community. So please become a co-conspirator of the Bro Diallo Show. Make a donation, become a Patreon. At the very least, share the show. Help us expand our reach, expand our audience. I want to share some music with you. We continue the dialogue, and I will also commit to doing a Q&A. Oh, and let me also, I will be giving a talk tonight. I will be on another media outlet. I did a show, The Myth of White Privilege, and some white guys got a hold of that show, and they want to talk to me about white privilege, and and talk to some white folks about white privilege. So they invited me to be on their show this evening. I'll share the link, and let everyone know about that if you want to see me talk to some white folks about white privilege or the myth of white privilege, because I never use that word, white privilege, because there's no such thing. But also, I will be giving a talk on next Saturday after next. It's a back to school panel discussion on black sons, black male youth in particular, going into this school year in Chicago, under the violence, the defunding, and all that other stuff. So we're going to have a panel discussion about rearing black youth under the gun in the South Side of Chicago. And Dr. Cartman has called me and some other fathers of young school-age boys and mothers of young school-age boys to have this panel discussion. So he invited me yesterday. I will also share details about that. And there's also, I got some invitation to speak at Northwestern. So any of these engagements, as I get the details, I will share them with you at Diallo Kenyatta, follow, and all that. Of course, you can subscribe to DialloKenyatta.com. I try to put things there, or Diallo Kenyatta YouTube and all that. But anyway, Q4 Radio, AM 1680. We'll be back Friday morning, but right now, let's listen to AFRICA by Stethosonic. After that, I will be back. Stay tuned if at q4.org, the TuneIn app, iTunes Radio, or if you're in the city of Chicago, check AM 1680.